So that was the beginning of the trip. And there I was feeling more connected with and protected by the universe than probably I've ever felt in my life. And it's just such an incredibly positive feeling. And it feels like the more you tap into these experiences, or the more you become aware of the synchronicities of life, the synchronistic existence, that's there all the time. It's just that our attention is generally elsewhere. It feels like the more you become aware of synchronicities, the more synchronicities you see, which is part of this acceleration. It's like, oh man, it's just a never-ending supply of synchronicities provided to you in any moment if you'd like to become aware of them. So it feels like as you put more attention on reality and the synchronicities of reality and feel how good it feels to be aware of that stuff, the more contrast there is between these super positive feelings and things that otherwise you perceive as normal, like normal thoughts, worries, egoic reactions, things that make you feel bad, become very apparent when you were just feeling super duper good and like nothing has ever gone wrong or will ever go wrong. Nothing can go wrong. Everything's perfect. So then when you start having thoughts like, oh man, sort of slipping back into the egoic existence, it feels really bad. Instead of feeling a part of everything, it feels like everything is out to get you. And I was home for 2 weeks, and about halfway through the trip, I was over in Seattle. I was staying with a friend of mine, and I went to a CVS just to pick up a charcoal toothbrush. I don't know why. I had always wanted to use one, and I'd forgot to bring my toothbrush to Seattle, so I was like, I'm going to get a charcoal toothbrush. And so I was in CVS, and I saw this guy who I looked at and kind of double took for a second, and then thought that it was somebody that I knew from high school, but he looked totally different. And I was pretty sure it was him, but I wasn't totally sure, so I kind of just followed him around a little bit, trying to figure out if it was him. And then eventually he like turned, he didn't look at me, but I saw his face and I was like, oh, that's totally him. And he had put on like a bunch of weight, and not like in high school, he was like probably one of the fittest dudes in the school. And I saw him in the store, and seeing him in this like totally different form, even though it was the same spirit and everything, I saw this guy who in high school I had always sort of perceived as like, oh my God, that guy is so jacked. And seeing him having put on a lot of weight, I noticed that the thoughts that came into my head were kind of like, holy shit, like really, damn dude, really let yourself go. Whew. It was very like judgmental, negative thoughts about this person who I haven't spoken to in like a decade. We weren't really friends, but like I knew who he was. And I have no idea what's gone on in his life. I don't know anything about him. All I know is that he weighs more than he used to, and he's not jacked. And it was weird watching my mind start almost like feeling good about this. And it's the ego. It's my mind being like, oh yeah, see, I might not be as jacked as I used to be, but at least I didn't fucking do what that guy did. And I was noticing this like as it was happening. It was crazy watching my mind begin feeling like a weird sense of relief and like egoic superiority. And I found my charcoal toothbrush, purchased it, went back to my friend's house, and as soon as I got in, I started telling him, I was like, dude, I just saw that, I'm not going to say his name, but I just saw the fucking, I'll call him Ben. I just saw Ben, dude. I just saw Ben at CVS, and like, dude, he looks really different. And my friend was like, how? And I was like, he put on a ton of weight. And I don't know, like my friend was like, oh, wow, interesting. I remember it being jacked. And I was like, yeah, me too. And it was so wild. Like halfway through this conversation, I sort of like really became aware of what was happening. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing right now? Why? What? I can talk about anything on Earth and in space, anything that exists or doesn't exist, anything that's the possibilities of things to talk about are infinite. And I am deciding to talk about somebody that I kind of knew in high school a little bit, is heavier than he used to be, and talking about it in a way that's like putting him down, and also talking to my friend about this. I'm taking his reality and hijacking it, taking his attention and putting it on me and the story that I'm telling about this guy. My friend also could be doing anything about it and thinking about anything about anything. And he's like, well, fuck, I guess sure, I guess I'll think about this guy then. And just, oh yeah, man, that's interesting that he put on weight. Yep, that tends to happen. Shocker, we're not 17 anymore. It's been 10 years. Like, people have mortgages and children and shit. Like, we don't have time to just be like, ripping weights all day. What I started noticing was I'm not saying this because I don't like fat people. I'm not saying this because I have an issue with people that gain weight. I'm saying this because this is somebody who I felt bad about myself because of in high school. And this guy didn't make me feel this way. I did this to myself internally in my head. I saw how jacked he was and looked at how not jacked I was and felt not good because of that. And it was interesting to see insecurities from a decade ago manifesting in my current reality. And I was thinking to myself, like, why are you doing this? What are you doing here? You don't have to, my friend's not sitting there thinking, damn, dude, you skinny fuck. Because that was one thing, I had like a hard time gaining weight. I was really skinny, and I always thought that made me like less of a man, So I was insecure about my weight in the same way. And so it was like, that was this weird sense of relief that crept in to my head as a result of seeing this guy. And I think part of it too is that, like, when I was playing soccer in college, I was working out all the time, and I got pretty big, and I started filling out into my body, and I got like top heavy, and I became this goofy soccer player who is like not the correct exercises to be doing at all for soccer. But when I graduated, I still kept lifting weights, but I wasn't doing any cardio. So I was bench pressing for no reason other than, I guess, trying to fill the void that these insecurities had left in me, or the holds that they had on me, trying to make me feel like I'm not enough or whatever. I don't know. But maybe basically in the last like 6 months, again, this crazy acceleration time frame, I stopped my gym membership and just started playing soccer and paddle. And that's what I do now for exercise. And it's great. I feel better than I've ever felt physically, and yet I am so skinny and so not jacked right now. And yet I feel good because it feels more natural. The things that I'm doing to exercise make me feel good, and I'm enjoying myself. I don't want to keep doing things because I think that it'll make people like me more, And it feels good to let go of that to some extent. And yet to be feeling this good about not working out anymore and having my own body change, and like to be having what is probably a very similar experience to this dude in CVS, where he's like, oh man, maybe I don't need to like rip steroids or whatever. Well, I mean, I don't know if he was taking steroids there, but might be my ego again. See, there's no way he could have had that body legitimately. It must have been fake. Or he's a cheater. I don't know. I don't know if he was on steroids, but he was so jacked. And he's probably like, almost 30, thinking to himself like, wow, this like really feels like my more natural state of being, maybe he has a wife, and she's into the dad bod. Maybe he's just his body's different and he feels better than ever. I don't know. But the thing about these situations, and what I realized was, even though I'm upset with myself initially for doing this, for talking shit to this dude, about this dude to my friend. It's just a projection of my own internal insecurities. And even though that's frustrating to see, what that really is an opportunity to be aware of what's happening and to let go of it, to register that it's there and that it's okay, and that the only thing that we have to do in order to allow that to dissipate is to be aware of it. The moment you become aware, choose different thoughts. Because when I'm talking shit about this guy, I'm not feeling good. Like, I have like a warped sense of good feeling because I'm like, oh, look, one less person who's more jacked than me. But the feeling of criticizing this person who I don't know for their change in body shape it's not like an actual feeling of happiness. It's not a feeling of love. It's a feeling of separation. It's like, oh, it's me against the world. Again, the ego perspective. And it's also like completely unachievable. Unless every single person in the world is less strong than me, the ego will never be satisfied. And even if I became the strongest person in the world, the moment I did, the ego would start feeling like it's not smart enough because it's insatiable. It just jumps to the next thing. So in these moments where you catch yourself being egoic, first, give yourself a pat on the back for recognizing it when you did. Oh, shit. My tower. Look at my little skinny tower. Oh, it's a skinny tower next to the big, thick, jacked tower. And they can coexist. And these two towers they're made of the same. They're both made of selenite, and it's for healing. And these two towers are one and the same. They're the same type of crystal, and they're just in different shapes, and yet they're from the same source. And I think they're probably just happy to be around each other, and probably not thinking to themselves, man, fuck you, you thick bitch. Or you skinny bitch. Anyway, what you feel when you do the things that you're doing is all you really need to, like, you can decide that. If I'm thinking to myself, fuck this guy, or yeah, that's right, you put on weight, you're not more jacked than me anymore. The feelings that I feel internally are feelings of insecurity, covered up by subtle reliefs from that insecurity. But ultimately, I don't feel good. And so when you catch yourself, decide to cultivate love for that person. Because it fucking feels so much better to love people instead of hate people or feel bad about yourself because of other people or whatever. Like, for me, it's like I've been stuck in these egoic loops for so long that now that I'm becoming aware of them, it's such an opportunity to break out. And so that's what I did. Like, in the middle of this conversation with my friend, I started like catching myself, and then I was like, hang on a minute. I hope you're happy, dude. I hope you're happier than you've ever been in your whole life, in your body, in your being. That's how I feel. And yet, even in these moments of intense happiness, it's still possible to slip back into egoic reaction. And that's okay. It's a process. Maybe for some people it's instant and it never happens again. But for some people, other people, including myself, it's like, okay, it's an ongoing thing. And the more we practice it, the more we become aware, the more we can change our egoic reactions, the more we can change our brain patterns and continue to put attention on synchronicities, how good it feels to feel love for somebody, no matter what they look like and no matter what they say or whatever. Like, just feel love for everyone, how good that feels compared to feeling, to thinking, yeah, that's right, I'm better than you because I just lost, my weight changed in a different direction. You gained weight, I lost weight, I'm just trying to feel better about myself. If you're loving everyone, you don't feel the need to feel better about yourself because what you're feeling is love. You're filled with it. And therefore you are experiencing love. And it is so much easier to love yourself when you are loving everyone else. Because what you feel inside of yourself is love. And when you feel hatred or competition or not enough or whatever it is that you feel internally, this resistance to the world, that's what you feel inside. So it just becomes a question of like, what do you want to feel? And I was thinking to myself more about it. I was like, okay, even though I agree with all of this, I don't think that it was just like my body change that it feels like it's deeper than this. Because I don't remember in high school, like, just having it be it's not like I saw other people that were jacked and I got really insecure about myself. There was something about this guy. And I remembered that, like, literally, like, just right before I was going to record this, I was thinking about what I was going to say. And I remembered a friend of mine in high school who told me that my girlfriend at the time was obsessed with this dude. Kind of a weird thing for a friend to tell you, but I remembered him saying that. And I also remembered my reaction to that, which was, I kept it together when he told me and tried to act like I didn't care, but the moment he left and also the moment he told me, internally I was devastated. And I had forgotten all about this. It almost feels like our ego blocks out the origins of the egoic reactions so that we can't really get to the root of it. And it makes it easier for it to operate if it's just like, hey, here's something that popped up, and don't worry about why this bothers you. Just worry about the fact that it bothers you. Just focus on that and get mad about it. Oh, everyone hates me. It was a weird thing to remember, but it was great too, because I was like, oh, there's more of the root. That's the unworthiness. I felt like I wasn't big enough of a dude, enough of a man, especially in high school, to be worthy of the love of or obsession of my girlfriend at the time. Even though she had given me no reasons to think that. This is just what I held internally. So then when something came along that exacerbated that belief, the unworthiness, it was such an intense thing. Versus if I felt totally at ease with myself and totally worthy, then I would be able to hear about my girlfriend at the time thinking that somebody was attractive and being like, oh, yeah, for sure. I also find people attractive. What a shocker. Maybe that doesn't mean that you want to abandon me and not be my boyfriend. Girlfriend. Whoops. I only date people who are 200 pounds and you're 160. I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but it wasn't. I wasn't really thinking about what was going to happen. It was just, grr. I don't know why my friend told me that. A little bit of an odd thing to say. And maybe he said that for his own reasons. Could be egoic. Maybe he was saying it because he wanted to let me know, hey man, just heads up. You're going to want to watch out for this dude because your girlfriend's obsessed with him. It's like, you don't need to know. You don't have to know anyone else's motivations in order to heal yourself internally and change the way that you behave. But it was helpful to just figure out where the actual insecurity came from. It is wild to become aware of things that are still operating in your psyche that you had no idea about until the dormant beliefs come to the surface from various different things, different triggers. But again, the best thing we can do is just become aware of what's happening as soon as possible and then make the conscious decision to feel differently, to think differently, or to dip out of thinking completely and experience what's happening now outside of thoughts. It's like a muscle. This is the real muscle I'm working out these days. I'm working out my emotional muscles, my attention muscles. You train. Recognizing that every egoic reaction is an opportunity to let go, and then also being grateful for the opportunity. Grateful to the people that caused it to come up. Grateful for this guy who showed up in my reality for a moment. We didn't even interact and allowed me to have this registration of something that was still in my head that I was insecure about. and to become aware of that and to let that go as much as possible. Thank you, dude. Thanks for that. And to the guy who fucking, said the thing about him being obsessed with my girl. Like, all of this stuff is interwoven. It's all for us. And you can go whichever way you want with it. I could have fucking spiraled. That girl and I have been broken up for like 6 years. But it's the beliefs that still run until we become aware of them and let them go. Maybe you don't even have to be aware of all of the beliefs to let them go. I think that's probably what happens, is like there's probably lots of self-conscious beliefs that I still held that as a result of healing the unworthiness and well, as much as I could, or as much as I have, even though I'm sure there's more to go, we heal these parts of ourselves that are the foundations for the different egoic beliefs that pop up. So perhaps even without being aware of some beliefs, just healing, the belief of being unworthy, I imagine that takes care of a whole bunch of stuff. But in any case, just if you find yourself in an egoic spiral, just come back as soon as you can. And the moment you become aware, be grateful for that. And then just feel love for yourself. Because even if I was 240 pounds and just totally shredded, it doesn't mean that I would be more worthy of existing or more worthy of love. And if I lost 40 pounds right now and I was down to 120 or whatever, I don't know how much I weigh. That's a nice thing. I used to weigh myself every day. I have no idea how much I weigh now. But it was Thanksgiving yesterday and I felt my collarbones and I was like, oh wow, this would have given me some anxiety in the past. But now it's just like, oh, hello there, collarbones. Thank you for keeping my torso together. It's very, very convenient of you to just show up there and fucking keep everything together. So anyway, why was I saying all of this? Because at the very end of the trip, it was the second to last night, and my mom and my dad and I were on the back porch. We started chatting at about 8 p.m. and we went to bed at 5. It was like one of the most intense chats I've ever experienced. What was so interesting about it is that it felt like we were communicating in a way that was almost as if we had no past. It was like we were talking to each other directly from now without any sort of baggage or things that were weighing us down from things that had happened ever. And there were so many moments that happened in this conversation that just felt like otherworldly, but it's more like this world, and just it's always been this world. It's just right now all of our attention is here. And it was happening to all three of us. And it was so intuitive. Like there was a moment where my dad started saying this stuff to me, like this long string of compliments that it's not that he doesn't give me compliments, but it was the way that he was saying this stuff. It was like I'd never heard anything said like this to me before. And also coming from my dad, he started talking and like, I don't know, maybe 15 seconds into what he was saying, we were on the back porch and I was standing up and my parents were sitting down and I was just kind of like bopping around. And within, 15 seconds of him talking, I like bent over at my knees and started just sobbing. And it wasn't from sadness. It was like deep landing of real, honest feelings from my father. It was intense. And he knew that I was okay. But it was interesting. And I was crying, and my mom got up and she came over to me and she kind of put her hand on my back. And I noticed right away in my head, what popped in was, I'm fine. I don't need your help. I don't need anything. I'm fine. I saw it. I felt it. Even in that moment of just being like showered with love, I felt this, I'm a big boy now, Mom. And but I just saw it and I was like, that's not what I want right now. Hey, let me just be aware of this and just thank you. Thank you for getting up out of your chair and coming to put your hand on my back to try to make me feel better. Even though she knew I was okay too, it was just like she had this intuitive feeling to come over and stand next to me and just give me some support. Which, even though I was egoically resistant to initially, as soon as I let that go, I realized I really needed it, because what my dad kept talking and it kept getting more intense. And my mom at one point like draped herself over me. Like I was bent over at my back and my mom was at perpendicular to me, and she like bent over my back. Like, you know, at car dealerships, the wavy people, or the wavy the blow up wavy things that blow in the wind. It was like that. And she like blew over on top of me. And it was hard to sort of like conceptualize in the moment, but what it felt like from what my dad was saying to me, it felt like I was going to like float away. I'm going to float away from love. And what it felt like my mom did without saying anything was she totally grounded me. Like she put this like loving, completely weightless and yet grounding body blanket on top of me that totally just like, it was just like this absolute like ambush of love from my family that they just, the teamwork between the two of them without any planning at all, it was entirely just spontaneous. It was so brilliant. And it felt like it like snapped me into this, I keep saying like otherworldly or other dimension, but it was like it snapped me back more into this dimension. It pulled me even more into the moment. It was like, okay, despite the unworthiness, despite all of this stuff, all of these things that I felt about myself for so long, it was like this confrontation from two of the people that loved me the most in the world saying this stuff to me, and it felt like my egoic resistance of I'm fine was my initial like, no, I don't, and then I just like with the help of both of them just like totally opened up to it, and it was so intense and amazing, and I loved it. So eventually my mom and dad sort of subsided. She released her love blanket and my dad stopped talking and she sat back down, and I was just telling them about how intense that experience was. And then it felt like we were just on like this incredible plane of existence that felt totally present with each other. And then something happened a few hours later. There was something that my dad said, or I forget what it was, but it was something that made her react to feelings of the past that are now coming up in this moment. And it feels like what he said is all of the emotional charge of the past is like bubbling up and and my dad and I, who again, like with all of these sort of like the waviness between the present existence and the egoic existence, when you're present, it's very easy to see ego, both in yourself and in others. And so my dad and I were both watching this happen. And also, like, because I've seen my parents argue countless times, you know, I'm seeing similar experiences that I've seen in the past. But my mom was reacting in ways that I'd seen in the past and my dad wasn't. And it was this amazing, again, like kind of without talking about it, my dad and I basically just shifted like all of our attention to my mom. And it was just like this team effort to bring her back into this space that she was just in a moment ago. But like what happened with me and the dude at CVS, or just a moment before this when I was trying to fight her on I don't need your love, you know, we slip out of it sometimes, and it's just habitual, and that's okay. But it was like my dad and I were trying to bring her back to where we were a second ago, and something happened where I still don't really know exactly what this was, but my mom was sitting down and she had her feet up on like an ottoman, and we were talking to her in sort of really like lovingly and peacefully, not fighting what she was saying at all, and just totally hearing everything that she was saying while still reminding her that like, yeah, like we love you. Like no amount of anger from you will change the fact that we love you. And it feels like it when you're in an egoic battle, it's hard to battle aggressively. If you're trying to pull someone out of an ego trip, it's hard to, you shouldn't feel this way. It's much easier to like hear it out, like sort of, it's like a gentle like guiding back into the moment or something. But I'd never experienced something like this before, and my dad and I were both doing it, and like I don't know why I did this, but I like at one point my mom got it, sort of like was like the peak egoic reaction part, and I like got down, I sort of like crouched down and put my hands on her calf. It was like the front of her, what is that area even called? There's your thigh, but below that, below your knee, between her knee and her tibia, fibia, I held the bottom half of her leg. And it felt like I had done this before. It felt like there was something that was happening with my hands where it felt like I was conveying things that I couldn't convey with words. And I was feeling like I was trying to explain to her how I was feeling by holding her leg. I think it could have been any part of her body, but for some reason that just felt intuitively right. And I still processing this, you know, but something shifted in her in that moment. And I don't know if it was just like the human touch or something. Maybe it was a combination of things, but it felt like she came out a little bit. She was less egoic than she had been feeling a moment ago. And once that happened, then my dad started saying things that were like really getting through to her, because she was upset with him from, you know, things that he had done in the past that were all coming up, and he was basically just approaching it from right now. Because you can't change any of the stuff from the past, but hey, I'll never do it again, and I love you, and I can't do anything to prevent what's happened, but I can prevent it from happening again. And it was this combination of like, it happened like right after this leg thing, and it was a similar experience. It's like what was happening with me, where I'm like, whoa, whew. It's like waking up from a blackout, from like an egoic blackout. And it's not like the egoic blackouts are always like aggressively like, I'm so mad at the world. It's also like, you know, deep sadness, unworthiness, whatever it is, feeling like you're not enough. You're not a part of the whole thing. And she came out of it. She came out of it, and then it was like, okay, we just reached another level of presence, all of us, all three of us. And just in the same way that like continuing to work this attention muscle, this presence muscle, the more you come back to now, the more intense now becomes. Every time it just gets better. It just keeps getting better. And the conversation that we had after that, like, it felt like we were like on this cosmic stage of this back porch lit up by candles that were, I don't know, it felt like we had all been here before. Not necessarily on the deck before, but it felt like we had all been together before. And I don't know, it was the strongest feeling of connection to something more than this lifetime that I've felt. And that's what the hand thing felt like. It felt like I've never done this before in this lifetime, but I know what I'm doing. And that feeling was so sick. So I don't know if I had a past life where I was doing some sort of chiropractic work or body work or whatever, but somehow I knew what to do in that moment, and it didn't even cross my mind that maybe what I would be doing is crazy. And in the same way, like, my mom wasn't like, even though she was feeling egoic towards my dad, she wasn't like, don't touch me, what the fuck, you know, she was open to it too. And my dad didn't question it either. Like, it's just like this space of non-judgment, and then registering that if you are judged, that's somebody who is feeling judgment internally, and they're projecting it outward. So, hey, I love you. I hope you feel better. I'm not going to change my internal feelings of love and adjust and mirror your judgment to try to get back at you. I'm just going to keep feeling this way. So even if you're egoic with me, I'm tired. I'm tired of being egoic. I'm bored of it. It's boring. And it feels so good to not feel that way. So many hours after that of just like really cool cosmic conversation. And it felt like we were all just sort of like in amazement of what was happening, while at the same time being like, yeah, of course. That's the thing about reincarnation, is it's like we have no idea how we got here, and we have no idea what happens after. So in my head, it's like it's way crazier that we exist at all than the idea of us existing again. Because if we did this once and we don't know how, surely we could do it again. The only time we've ever experienced nothingness was before we were born. And we all experienced it, because we all have no recollection of what was before we were born. So maybe we don't need to be afraid of nothingness. If that's what's happened, if what happens after is the same thing as what happened before, after is going to be pretty chill. So I don't know, the more I think about that kind of stuff, the more I feel like reincarnation is just for sure what's been going on. What is going on? Also, just like take the, energy cannot be created or destroyed. That's science. So we're filled with energy. So even though our bodies die and decompose, the energy that's in us, that we all are, the same. It's like the rocks, the selenite rocks. It's all the same. We're the same energy. We're the molecules of the universe. We can't die. There's no death. It's just changing. So anyway, all of these things, that's what the hand thing felt like. I was like, I've done this before. I don't know what's happening, but it feels good, and I hope you come back, Mom. I love you. It was nuts. So we went to bed that night super late. So the next day, my dad and I were out at the table where we had eaten on that first night, out in the yard, and we were talking about the conversation that we had last night. And I was saying to him, like, how what he was saying was so interesting, because it felt and sounded like something that I'd never heard him say. Even like the tone of his voice was so definitive, and not that he's not a definitive person, but it was like it was flowing out of him. And he started saying that was what it felt like for him. He was like, he said it felt like he was channeling something or someone or himself, maybe his authentic self, his higher self, but he described it as channeling. And it was so interesting hearing him say that, because that's what my hand thing felt like. Even though I wasn't channeling words, it felt like I was channeling, abilities. I was doing something that it felt like I'd never done before, and yet I had absolutely done it before. It was like, as me and my parents became more in the moment, the more we began behaving in ways that we've always known how to behave, but we're only remembering how to behave as a result of becoming more present, as a result of becoming more here, I guess. I'm not sure. But once he said the thing about channeling, that prompted him to tell me this story from this Vipassana meditation retreat. So my mom, before I was born, my mom went on a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat. And once she came back, my dad saw her, and she had been dropped off by somebody who was at the retreat, and he said that they were just smiling so intensely, and they, he was just like, what's happening there? Like, I gotta have some of that. We'll have what you guys are having. And so he signed up for a course, and my mom drove him to the course, and when they got there, he signed up and he was ready to go, and then I guess she left. And then she like felt bad leaving him there. And so she drove back like 3 hours or something and did the retreat with him. And anyway, these retreats are super wild. And I'll get into a lot of the details of my experiences with them because I've done 3 of them now. And I'll get into all of these experiences on another episode. But in that first retreat that my dad did, he told me about all these wild experiences that he had on this retreat. And one of the things that happened to him was, I don't remember which day it was on, but at one point he said that it felt like this energy came into his body and it started like moving him around. It started like causing him to like stretch out, and he'd be in the Dhamma hall, which is where everyone meditates, and he would be like, like contorting his body because of how good it felt, whatever this energy was that was kind of moving him around. And, the assistant teachers there would come over and tell him, you gotta chill out, like stop. And so he started resisting the energy. And he said that when he resisted the energy, it felt like really, really painful. And it was something that went on for a while, and then he just kept battling it. And then apparently he could like ask it questions too. So it would be like, he would ask a question and then his head would start turning side to side or moving up and down. Over the course of the next couple of days, he said it was just getting like super frustrating because he wanted to stop having this thing move him around and stuff. Eventually on a certain day, it just like left his body. And he said that the feeling of it leaving was just like so intense, and it sent like shivers down, every part of his being was like tingling and stuff. Anyway, after the retreat ended, he said that he went to a library and got like all of these books on channeling to try to figure out what had happened. And he came across this one book written by a guy who also lived in Seattle. And this is like way back in the day, so they didn't have cell phones and stuff. So he wrote him a letter. And he explained what the experience was like. And this guy, who was apparently a famous channeler at the time, called my dad's home phone. And my dad picked up. And the guy apparently told him that he didn't really pick up much from the story that my dad told me. But the one thing that he did pick up is that this energy that my dad was experiencing was like a puppy dog. It was like puppy dog, playful energy. And he said that it wasn't something that my dad needed to be afraid of, and that it was just here for fun and not to harm him or anyone. And when he told me that, I sort of had this registration of, it felt like it hit me in my soul, because that is how I feel. Like if I was to chalk up like my general feeling in existence, it's like, I just want to play. Like, I just want to have like a bunch of fun. And when he said that it was like a puppy dog, it really clicked in my head, because on TikTok, or, like the only animal that I've ever been compared to frequently is a puppy dog. People are like, oh, you're like a golden retriever. And that's kind of how I feel. I'm just like, fuck yeah, man. Like, it feels good to exist. This is sick. And it just feels fun to be alive. And I don't know. It feels like very core to my being. And so when my dad said that that was the only thing that this guy told him about this energy, it was like, wow, this, like, I feel like that was me. because this happened before I was born. But the key is, my parents were trying to get pregnant for like a long time before that retreat. And they got pregnant immediately after the retreat happened. So I don't know if I just came in my, my when I was inhabiting the space of nothingness, when my energy wasn't in a physical form and I was just, playing around in the cosmos. I guess I just came by and tried to, my dad was in law school at the time. He said he was super stressed out. So maybe I just came in and massaged him a little bit, just relax a little bit, man. Have more fun. Get my mom pregnant, just don't take it so seriously. Like, chill out. Who knows? But that, to me, it started making sense. Like, how is it that this channeler, because apparently my dad said he had all these questions and he kept asking this guy all this stuff, and he was like, look, I really don't have much time. I can't talk about this. I just picked up on this from the story that you wrote me, and I just wanted to say that it was like a puppy dog. And then they had me. They got pregnant with me like immediately after the retreat. And then they had me, and they tried to get pregnant for a while after that too and have another kid, and it never happened. So, I don't know, dude. This is pretty cool. So, yeah, I don't know. It was trippy. And it made a lot of sense to me, feeling-wise. In the same way that the hands made sense to me, it felt right to do that. And especially in the context of everything that we'd been experiencing the night before, all of this seemingly familiar feelings that may span lifetimes. It felt like, of course that's possible. We're energy that just inhabited these bodies. Surely our energy comes from somewhere and goes somewhere after. So where is that space? Maybe it's just around in the universe. And it's like, okay, I'm about to come into physical form, but before I do, let me prime you. So I think I was just like, you're too stressed. You're in law school, man. Relax. And now here I am. And Vipassana is trippy too, because later on in the conversation, what my dad, because we were talking about the meditation, and he was like, do you remember the retreats that you went on as a kid? And I was like, I hadn't thought about them in ages, but yeah, I do. And he had taken me on 3 child Vipassana meditation retreats, because they have them for kids. And they're much shorter. They're only 3 days. But you go and you get dropped off and you meditate. The schedule is way less intense, of course. But I went and did them. He took me to them once a year at ages 8, 9, and 10. And what we realized was that was the exact time frame that I was being molested for. So my dad, without knowing anything about what was happening with the molestation, for whatever reason, had the intuition to bring me to these meditation retreats, literally for the exact time frame that I was being abused. And it certainly brought in a level of awareness that I wouldn't have had otherwise, even though I was a kid. It made me more aware of like things that we've been talking about, like how do I really feel about things? The abuse was so confusing, and it like probably made me more aware of the love that I was receiving from my mom, and like the stuff that we were talking about in the last episode. Like, it probably made me feel more worthy. Like both of my parents, they gave me the tools to get out of the situation. Not that you need these tools in order to speak up, but they gave me tools to make it easier. And I don't know if I would have spoken up without them. I'm fairly certain I wouldn't have. But just to register that we did that at that exact time frame was so trippy, because of what we had just talked about like the significance of Vipassana. Like, it's the only time in my dad's life that he's ever had an experience like that, and it was Vipassana meditation that he was doing. And then my first experience with Vipassana meditation, other than inhabiting my dad's body on the retreat potentially, was right when the abuse started. And then every year as it lasted, and then as long as it lasted, and then I didn't go again until I was 24. So that was really trippy to realize. And yeah, man, that was the last day. And then that night, before my mom got home, I forgot to say this too, but my dad had printed off the lyrics to Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. And I should also say that, like, during this conversation and the conversation the night before, like, we were just like crying hard, often. Like, it was such an emotional release, but the emotion was different. It was like joyful cries. I mean, at this point in my life, like, all cries feel like good cries because it's just the reality of your emotion in that moment. And these cries were like, it was like connection cries. Like, I felt so connected with my parents and the universe and like everything. It was just, the crying was intense. But when my dad got the lyrics for Wish You Were Here, which he printed out and brought out to the table, and we started reading them, how I wish you were here. We're just two lost souls swimming in a fishbowl year after year, running over the same old ground. What have we found? Same old fear. I wish you were here. He brought this out and he was like, this is what it feels like. This is what it feels like happened. It was like our souls found each other again. Somehow we were brought back together, all of us. And that was the intensity of the connection. It felt fucking amazing, dude. And it gets crazier. So my mom got home from work that day and we told her all about the realizations we had about the puppy dog, about, fucking all this stuff. And my mom mentioned to my dad that they had seen a channeler. Apparently after I was born, they went to some lady named Batya, who I guess gave them like a reading of sorts, or, I guess it was the only like person like this they'd ever seen. But for whatever reason, they decided to go and hear what she had to say. And they had a recording from that experience. And we were like, we got to get this recording. Like, how amazing would that be to listen to, especially right now? And so they weren't sure where it was, and we started looking around the house. In our living room, we have this big bookcase, and there's probably like 80 books on the bookcase. And my dad was looking in the bottom right corner of the bookcase. And I walked over to him because it was dark, and so I shined the light of my phone light on where he was looking, and he didn't really see anything. So I started eventually I turned around and walked back the other way, and this book, like just a small fraction of this book was like sticking out of the bookcase. And it caught my attention because it was like just nicely colored. I didn't see any of the cover other than just like the side of it, and the colors just caught my eye for whatever reason. And so I just decided to pull it out. And I pulled it out, and here's the photo. It's a dude and a dog looking out over the horizon. I pulled this out and I was like, holy fucking shit, Dad, look. It's the dude and the dog. This is just what we were talking about. And he looked at it and he had like next to no reaction. And I was like, what the fuck, man? Like, I thought this was what this was all about now. And he was like, no, it's not that it's not cool. I just don't feel as significant about it as you do. And I'm like, I didn't even see the cover. It's not like I looked at this and then I just pulled this out for no reason other than the colors look pretty. And then here's the cover of the book. And he was like, yeah, man, yeah, no, it's cool. But he was just like nowhere near as excited as I was for it. So, which was okay. I mean, I remember feeling a little bit like, oh man, but it was all good. So I put the book back, and there were probably, for the next hour or so, we were looking in the garage for Batya tapes, and we found all these old photos, and so we were looking through those, and it was a fun like reminiscing night, and at one point we were like, all right, it'll turn up, it's all good, no worries. And it was like 11 o'clock, and we were all so tired from the night before, and so we went back upstairs, and my dad and I sat down in the living room, and my mom went into the kitchen, and we started talking, and we were like, I was like, hey mom, can you come in here? Like we want to talk with you. And she was like, she sort of heard like a little like rummaging, like a little flustered. Oh, I can't, I'll be in a minute. That type of thing. My mom's, I'll be in a minute. She's British. And so we kind of like were waiting to start talking because we wanted her to be there for it. And we were like, what are you doing? Like, come in here. And that sort of flipped a little egoic switch in her mind, because one of the things that she's been frustrated with me and my dad forever for is like, we're not like a typical family in that we like always eat at the same time. Even though on this trip we were doing it a bunch, like for most of my life, we don't do that often. And she would always, get mad at us for not, when we did do it, we wouldn't clean the table. We weren't very like domestic dudes. So what she started feeling was like basically that there was like stuff that needed to be done in the kitchen. And we were like, stop doing that. Come over here. And she didn't want to stop because she felt like she needed to do this stuff. And we, being the non-domesticated dudes, were just like, it's just come on, dude. Like, we're trying to chat here and go to bed. Like, just come over here. So she started getting frustrated, and it was so apparent in her demeanor when she did eventually come in, which took a while. It felt like at a certain point, she was just not even doing stuff in there. She was just trying to prove a point. Things need to be done in the kitchen, and you're not doing them. She made some point that was like, it would go a lot faster if you would just come in here and help me. And then we were like, that's a fair point, but just come in here. Come on. Eventually she came in, but she was upset. So we sort of just like immediately reverted back into like ego defense mode, or more like ego love mode. Reacting to ego with love and, hey, come on, same team, it's all good. You're right. No, there's a lot that needs to be done in the kitchen, and we're sorry for not helping. It's just that in this particular moment, we'd really like to be talking, and we can clean up the kitchen later. And then she's like, well, you guys never clean it up, and that's the problem because you... So again, pulling the past in, all the times that we haven't cleaned up in the past, coming into this particular moment where we're trying to talk about how amazing life is and stuff, and it's like... So we went into not battle mode, but lovingly approaching the reintegration, come back to the moment mode. And this is where my dad started talking about wish you were here. Because in these moments where you're interacting with somebody who is upset with you or just egoically wrapped up, maybe they don't feel good about themselves or whatever, they don't feel like they're connected to you or the universe or whatever. In these moments, it's like what we wish you were here. We love you, and we want you to feel how we're feeling. And we're sorry for all the times that we haven't cleaned up, including right now. But right now, what we'd like to do is talk about how amazing it is that we are a family, that it feels like we've known each other before this. It's like we're all discovering all of this together, and it's like this amazing cosmic team, and it's so intense. And so it was frustrating also just to be like, come on, like we were just here a second ago. Can you just, we'll all clean the kitchen in a moment, but let's just debrief here before we call it for the night. And it felt like, it wasn't totally a loving, even though it was out of love, it was a little bit more combative than it would have been optimal. Even though everything that happens is optimal, even if we can't figure out why. But in those moments, it was like, all right, we could have been probably a little bit more peaceful about it. Anyway, we kept going and sort of battling. And then there was eventually like, it felt like we were starting to get through to her. And then there was like this moment where like I went over to her and put my hand on her back. Same thing, I kind of crouched down. This is another thing that I realized about the experience holding her leg and then holding her back was both times I kind of crouched down like a little dog, just like at the base of the couch or the chair. And I put my hand on her back without knowing what was going on. But now I'm like, oh yeah, just do it. You know what to do. You don't have to question it. And so I did that. And then my dad started saying something. He used to be a lawyer. And so he started saying like, we have proven without a reasonable doubt that this existence does not have to be this way. Something like that. And I was like, hey, just hold on for a moment is what I said to him, because I felt my mom like relaxing and releasing. She had gone quiet after battling for a while. And, I know my mom's response to the legal stuff, and understandably is like pretty frustrating. It's probably pretty frustrating to be married to a lawyer. Anyway, he agreed and he didn't say anything for a while, and we all went silent for about a minute. And then she had like this really sort of quiet little sob just for a second. And then it was like the floodgates opened. And, up until this point, my mom hadn't cried. Like, it had just been me and my dad crying a bunch. And, similar to the conversation that we had on the first night, where it was like feeling like you can't express your emotions because you don't want me to feel bad. I think that there was some of that still. She was still feeling that way to some extent. So in this moment, it was like she totally opened. And it was just like this beautiful release. She totally came back. And again, more present than ever, which elevated everyone. And then this is really where it gets intense. So one of the things that we were battling about, she kept saying, "You guys, you men have no idea what it's like to run the kitchen. You sit around all day and expect food to be prepared, and then it shows up and you expect it to be cleaned as if it blah, 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 blah." All understandable, reasonable points. I agree to some extent. But the main thing that she was making a point of was that it's like, you guys don't understand what it's like. And then after she had this cry, it was like she was totally back and we were a team again. It wasn't guys versus girl or woman. It was fuck genders, yo. We're a family. It doesn't, none of this, we're cosmically connected, dude. It doesn't matter what our genders are at all. It's like, we're a fucking family and we love each other, and it's all okay. Everything's going to be fine. Everything is fine. And so once we were back in the space, once we were all here, she just started like opening. Like, she started telling us stories about her past that she rarely talks about. Her dad died when she was young, and I had never really heard her talk about him. And, she started talking about like what that experience was like, because we were talking about her crying, and I was saying like, I don't really know if I've ever seen you cry. Like maybe once in my life. And so we started talking about her crying history and, why that may be. In addition to not wanting to show emotions for my protection, we started getting into why she doesn't cry. And one of the things that she talked about was like when her dad died, she was 10, and her mom basically told her and her sister started crying, and my mom was like, don't cry. Basically I think she was trying to be like the strong, older sibling, and basically telling her not to cry. And then maybe that built this sort of foundation for her perception of crying, which is, no, that's weak. You can't do that. Whatever it may be. But she told us this story, and it was so fascinating to listen to. She said that basically they just went to school the day after he died, like the very next day. And she was saying how she remembered them all singing hymns together. Her sister was a year younger, so they were in a different section at school, but they were all singing the hymns together. And she said she remembered my aunt, Ronnie, she remembered thinking to herself as she was singing about how she felt so bad for Ronnie. And she was really hoping that she was like okay, and that she just felt really bad about the whole situation. And it was so fascinating. And my dad was saying, like, I've never heard you tell these stories before. Like, this is amazing. Like, to find this stuff out about your wife of 30 plus years, like, it's very trippy. And it was just totally a function of like being in this open, vulnerable space, this safe space of, being surrounded by people who love you, who just want what's best for you and are here for you no matter what. There's nothing you could say to us that would make us stop loving you. And also releasing all of the baggage that you had, anger towards us, all the times that we haven't cleaned the dishes or whatever it is, So she was telling us that, and then she started telling us this story about her being on the playground and these experiences that she's had. And then she was like, oh, this is so funny. It feels like I'm like reading a children's book or something. And I was like, immediately I was like, oh, like this, and I ran over. We're still in the living room, and I ran over and grabbed the book from the bookshelf from earlier with the dog and the dude on it, and I was like this, look at this book. And my mom was like, oh, it's the puppy dog. And I was like, yeah, it's the puppy dog, that's what I'm talking about. Like, that's the kind of reaction I was looking for. Not that any reaction needs to happen, but she was excited about it. And so I looked at this book. This is the cover of the book, All Things Bright and Beautiful. Like, come on, that's what so much of these conversations were, was just how beautiful everything is. And so on the back, it says, all things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all. And I opened the book up, and on the inside cover was a message. So Ribbit is what my mom's nickname for Ronnie was, Ribbit. And her nickname for my mom, whose name is Debbie, is Dribble. And it said, Dearest Dribble, when I saw this book, it reminded me of Egerton Grove and how much I enjoyed singing this hymn as a child. It's literally just like... These are the types of tears that happen now, where it's just like, fuck, man, this is so intense and beautiful, and we are it. We're experiencing it. It's so amazing. When I saw this book, it reminded me of Egerton Grove and how much I enjoyed singing this hymn as a child. I hope you enjoy the memory too. Love always, Ribbit. So my aunt had sent my mom this book, and I'd never seen this book before earlier this day, like an hour beforehand. And it was my mom saying her stories are like, it's like a children's book, that made me pull this book out again and then see this message on the inside, which was from the exact person that my mom was worried about. And she was worried about her not being okay while they were singing hymns the day after their dad died. And all the times that she's probably been mean to her since then, or made her feel like she shouldn't cry, or whatever it is. And here is this message from the person that she's referring to. Signed, Love Always. I love you no matter what, forever. And she's literally saying how much she enjoyed singing this hymn as a child. And Egerton Grove was the school that they were going to at the time. And this, like, when I read this out loud, like, my parents and I started, like, it was literally like we were all just like, holy shit, holy fucking shit. Because we were registering what was happening. Like, what the way that this whole sequence transpired in a day, in 2 weeks, it's been transpiring. I don't know when my aunt sent my mom this book, but years ago. And it shows up, and I pulled it out for no reason. I pulled it out, but there was a reason. I just didn't see it yet. And I felt it. I felt the excitement about it. And when I pulled it out, my dad was like, yeah, I guess, because neither of us knew yet what it was, but there was something. I knew that there was something to this. And I thought it was the dog and the person, which was part of it. But there's so many parts, and all the parts are part of the big picture. It's all these different beautiful puzzle pieces put together that make you see the, like, infinite brilliance of the universe that we all are. And so, man, dude, we saw that, and it took all of this to a whole other level. It's like all these synchronicities, all these experiences, all the moments of presence, all the egoic reactions, everything, it all is for you to experience reality more intensely, I guess. It just felt like an undeniable experience, undeniable evidence of more. There's more to this existence than just us in these bodies, skinny or fat. There's more to this. There's so much more than the little version of ourselves that our egos perceive us to be. And it's who we are fundamentally. It's who we've always been and who we always will be. It's the energy. It's the infinitely intelligent, interconnected energy that connects us all forever. Like, for this sequence to happen, it's like beyond math. Like, the odds of this are so much lower than zero. And yet it happened, and we all saw it happen, and we felt it and experienced it, and it just like, it was just the most intense pull-in to reality, and like this blissful protective force that just has your back, all of our backs, all the time. It is us. Man, it was a lot. Even now it's a lot. I don't know. This is the acceleration. This is what it is now. This is what life is. This is reality. And it feels so amazing, dude. It was like the ultimate cherry on top of this trip home. This was the very last night. I left the next morning, and it felt like we got to the conclusion that we needed to get to. Conclusion is, it's not even a conclusion. It's just a point on the infinite path. Incredible cosmic checkpoint that, is not a conclusion. It's an ongoing thing. But the end of this particular trip. But wow, dude, this happened, and I was like, well, there it is. There's the peak, because of how time becoming so irrelevant. Because how did this just happen, bro? I don't know. But you don't need to know. We don't have to understand it to experience it. We don't have to understand it to enjoy it. We can just enjoy it without needing to wrap our conceptual brain around it. Why did this happen? I don't know. It's clearly magnificent, and I'm more interested in enjoying than trying to figure out how. And since I don't know how I got into my body, I don't know how I was born, and yet we have a pretty good idea now. Puppy dog, woof. But none of us know how we were born, and yet we all did it. So maybe we don't need to know everything in order to enjoy this existence. And I think letting go of the need to know, the need to understand, the need to be jacked, the need to be right, letting go of all of that, it just makes you feel so much more happy. It's a loving existence. And like what Ribbit said, it's always loving. There's never a moment where you haven't been loved by the universe. And I'm happy to be sharing this moment with you. So, man, thank you for listening, watching. I feel like I say this a lot, but I am so incredibly grateful to have a place where I can talk about this, to experience it with my family and experience it with you. This is all of us. Like, we're all in this. And it just comes down to where we put our attention. And so thank you for putting your attention on this podcast for the last however long it's been. It means a lot. And I'm so grateful for you. Whew. Woo! All right. I'll see you guys later. Peace.